The Space Launch System is an American super heavy lift expendable launch vehicle under development by NASA since 2011. The SLS is intended to become the successor to the retired Space Shuttle, and the primary launch vehicle of NASA's deep space exploration plans through the 2020s. As of August 2019, SLS Block 1 launch vehicles are to launch the first 3 Artemis missions, and 5 subsequent SLS flights are planned to use Block 1B, after which all flights will use Block 2. The SLS is planned to launch the Orion spacecraft as part of the Artemis program, making use of the ground operations and launch facilities at NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. SLS will launch from LC-39B at the Kennedy Space Center. After the first 4 Artemis missions, NASA plans to transfer production and launching of the Space Launch System to Deep Space Transport LLC, a joint venture between Boeing and Northrop Grumman. The stock of SLS Block 1 to 1B boosters is limited by the number of casings left over from the shuttle program, which allows for 8 flights of the SLS. On the 2nd of March 2019, the Booster Obsolescence and Life Extension Program was announced. During the joint Senate-NASA presentation in September 2011, it was stated that the SLS program had a projected development cost of $18 billion through 2017, with $10 billion for the SLS rocket, $6 billion for the Orion spacecraft, and $2 billion for upgrades to the launch pad and other facilities at Kennedy Space Center. In September 2012, an SLS deputy project manager stated that $500 million is a reasonable target average cost per flight for the SLS program. In August 2014, as the SLS program passed its Key Decision Point C review and entered full development, costs from February 2014 until its planned launch in September 2018 were estimated at $7.021 billion. The request for a budget increase of $1.6 billion towards SLS, Orion, and crewed landers along with the launch manifest seem to indicate support of the development of Block 1B, debuting Artemis III. Estimates of the per-launch costs for the SLS have varied widely, partly due to uncertainty over how much the program will expend during development and testing before the operational launches begin, and partly due to various agencies using differing cost measures, but also based on differing purposes for which the cost estimates were developed. There are no official NASA estimates for how much the SLS will cost per launch, nor for the SLS program annual recurring costs once operational. NASA Associate Administrator William H. Gerstenmaier said in 2017 that there would be no official per-flight cost estimates of any variety provided by NASA for the SLS. Other bodies, such as the Government Accountability Office, the NASA Office of Inspector General, the Senate Appropriations Committee, and the White House Office of Management and Budget have put out cost per launch figures, however. A concept study report for a space telescope stated it was advised by NASA HQ in 2019 to budget $500 million for an SLS launch in 2035. Another study in 2019 also proposing a space telescope assumed a budget for their launch of $650 million in current-day dollars, or $925 million for when the launch would occur, also in the mid-2030s. Europa Clipper is a NASA scientific mission that was initially required by Congress to launch on the SLS. Oversight bodies both internal and external to NASA disagreed with this requirement. First, NASA's Inspector General Office published a report in May 2019 that stated Europa Clipper would need to give up $876 million for the marginal cost of its SLS launch. Those savings may have included a portion of costs related to the delay in launch schedule. A commercial alternative could launch earlier than SLS. The JCL analysis cited in that letter put the cost savings at $700 million, with the SLS at $1.05 billion per launch and the commercial alternative at $350 million. The letter suggested Congress remove this requirement, agreeing the NASA Inspector General, adding that using a commercial launch vehicle for Europa Clipper instead of the SLS would save $1.5 billion overall. NASA did not deny this $2 billion cost of launch, and an agency spokesperson stated it is working to bring down the cost of a single SLS launch in a given year as the agency continues negotiations with Boeing on the long-term production contract and efforts to finalize contracts and costs for other elements of the rocket. Exploration Ground Systems, whose only role is to support, assemble, integrate, and launch SLS, has separately budgeted fixed costs of $600 million per year on facilities, spread across however many rockets launch that year. In December 2019, NASA Administrator Jim Bridenstine shared informally that he disagrees with the $2 billion figure since the marginal cost of an SLS launch should decrease after the first few, and is expected to end up around $800 million to $900 million, although contract negotiations were only just beginning for those later cores. In July 2021, NASA announced that instead of SLS, a SpaceX Falcon Heavy would be used to launch Europa Clipper. In November 2021, a new NASA Office of Inspector General audit was released, which estimated that, at least for the first 4 launches of SLS, the per-launch production and operating costs would be $2.2 billion for SLS, plus $568 million for exploration ground systems. The SLS was created by an act of Congress in 2010, Public Law 111-267, in which NASA was directed to create a system for launching payloads and crew into space that would replace the capabilities lost with the retirement of the Space Shuttle. The act set out certain goals, such as being able to lift 130 tons or more of payload into low Earth orbit, a target date of December 31, 2016 for the system to be fully operational, and a directive to use, to the extent practicable, existing components, hardware, and workforce from the Space Shuttle and from Ares I-12 on the 14th of September 2011, NASA announced their plan to meet these requirements, the design for the SLS, with the Orion spacecraft as payload. The SLS has considered several future development routes of potential launch configurations, with the planned evolution of the blocks of the rocket having been modified many times. On the 7th of August 2014, the SLS Block 1 passed a milestone known as Key Decision Point C and entered full-scale development, with an estimated launch date of November 2018. On the 12th of June 2021, NASA announced the assembly of the first SLS rocket was completed at the Kennedy Space Center. In late 2015, the SLS program was stated to have a 70% confidence level for the first Orion flight that carries crew, the second SLS flight overall, by 2023. As of November 2021, NASA delayed Artemis II from 2023 to May 2024. Although the SLS is only confirmed for use on the first few Artemis missions, many NASA mission concept studies for robotic missions plan to launch on the SLS, such as Neptune Odyssey, Europa Lander, Enceladus Orbolander, Persephone, Hebex, Origin Space Telescope, LUVOIR, Lynx, and Interstellar Probe. The SLS has been criticized based on program cost, lack of commercial involvement, and the non-competitive nature of a vehicle legislated to use space shuttle components. In 2011, Representative Tom McClintock and other groups called on the Government Accountability Office to investigate possible violations of the Competition in Contracting Act, arguing that congressional mandates forcing NASA to use space shuttle components for the SLS are de facto non-competitive, single-source requirements assuring contracts to existing shuttle suppliers. Phil Plait shared his criticism of the SLS in light of ongoing budget trade-offs between the commercial crew development and SLS budgets, also referring to earlier critiques by Garver. As of 2019, the maiden launch of the SLS was expected in 2021. NASA moved out $889 million of costs relating to SLS boosters, but did not update the SLS budget to match, a March 2020 Inspector General report found. Ars Technica commented that the average cost of each RS-25 therefore rose to $146 million, so each SLS launch uses $580 million for its 4 engines. In 2011-2012, the Space Access Society, Space Frontier Foundation, and the Planetary Society called for the cancellation of the project, arguing that the SLS will consume the funds for other projects from the NASA budget. In the summer of 2019, a former ULA employee claimed that Boeing, NASA's prime contractor for SLS, viewed orbital refueling technology as a threat to the SLS and blocked further investment in it.